Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us this beautiful, beautiful Easter day. Um, Carl and I are actually recording this on Friday because the weather's kind of nasty on Friday, and so we thought if Saturday's nice, we could get outside and do something. So it's it's Good Friday for us, but it will be Easter for you. So thank you for joining us. I just have a couple of things to go over. Our ladies group is going to be starting a new Bible study. It's called The Magnificent Story by James Bryan Smith. Beautiful, beautiful book. Even if you don't join the study, it's a definitely book worth reading. So we'll be doing that on Thursday nights at 6:30 on Zoom, starting in a couple of weeks. So if you want to be a part of that, please let me or Deanne know so we can get books ordered, or you can go ahead and order your own book off Amazon. But we'd love to have you join us. Our men's group is taking a few weeks off now from their study. They finished the book that they were doing, so I'll keep you updated on when they're going to start up again. Today is our capital improvement offering. So you know the drill. You can go to thefathershouse.org, click on the giving button. You can give to capital improvements. You can give your regular tithes. You can give to our missions that way. Or you can mail a check into the Father's House at 133 Bernal Road, San Jose, California, 95119. Or if you live in the local area and you'd like Pastor Carl or I to come by and pick up your tithe checks, we'd be happy to do that too. And thank you once again for all your generosity in this year. I can't believe it's already April, but we're running strong at the Father's House. So I hope you take some time and enjoy your family today. Enjoy a meal with them, or have a walk outside, or whatever you want to do. Last week we talked. I kind of challenged everybody to spend the week going through what happened in that week of Jesus's life, and I've done that this week. In fact, last week. I shared a little bit of that process during the communion service. In this book, what I did this week, in this book, it starts out of this guy talking about his little daughter Hope and how every night she wanted a bedtime story. So if they were late coming home and he just wanted to make sure she got a good night's rest, he would not read her a book. He would make up stories. And he told her the first night, he told her the story of Hope and the Beanstalk. So he made Hope the main character in the story. So when I read that, I started thinking about this week, this Passion Week, this Holy Week, and what was going on in Jesus's life. So when we did communion, I said, shut your eyes and imagine you in the upper room with Jesus and the disciples. And then imagine Jesus saying, hey, there's the empty seat here at the table because Judas has already left. Come join us. So it was this whole idea of Jesus inviting you to the table. And I thought, what a beautiful way to study for the Passion Week this week. I really went and put myself in the picture. As I was reading the story of what happened to him every day, I really made myself a character in the story. And it really brought out some details that I had never stopped and thought about. And I'm kind of getting choked up because this Friday is probably the worst day that anyone could ever imagine going through. And yet Jesus' faith just stayed so strong. He just looked to his Father. He spent time with his disciples. He spent time with his mother. And I just thought, what a beautiful thing. But I'm picturing now looking up at that cross and watching him suffer. And just so thankful that he would do that for me and for you. So I hope this week has been a blessing for you as it has been for me. And if you don't join us at church on Sunday, I hope you have a blessed day and really reflect on what Jesus means to you, because he did rise.
Well, good morning, Father's House. I know that you're having a great day today. It's a great day that we're celebrating Easter, and so we're glad to have you here. Like Penny said, you'll be watching this on Easter Sunday, maybe Saturday, because I usually load it late Saturday. I guess should say late afternoon Saturday. So you might see it before then, but probably you're going to see it on Sunday, or maybe you'll see it even later than that. But Penny is right that today we're actually recording it on Good Friday, which is a profound event and a profound day. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today as we move into the Easter story. So I'm just glad to be here. Penny kind of ended abruptly there because she got all choked up. And I think part of it is this week is just a special week and I talked about this last week, and I talked probably more about it on Sunday morning at church than I did on this video last week about the idea of getting into these spiritual rhythms, of finding a groove. And through this Easter week of focusing every single day of this week from the triumphal entry all the way through the resurrection, of focusing on what that day means. So the first day that we're talking about is, we talked about this last week, was the time of the Easter week, that last week where Jesus accomplished what he set out to do. And last week we talked about the triumphal entry, which happened on a Sunday. I also had mentioned that on Monday, that was a day where we had some dialogue with people, but primarily it was the day that we recognized the cleansing of the temple according to the Gospel of John. The third day, which would have been Tuesday, what we find is he was in these intense battles with the religious leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees, and they're finally beginning to understand that what he's saying is going to happen is the kingdom of God is going to be stripped from them and given to a people that will be more faithful with what it means to be the carriers of this gospel message, or of the kingdom of God, or what it means to be representatives of God. That day was Tuesday was so exhausting for him that on Wednesday we don't have any account of anything, which means he probably spent it away either by himself, maybe with just his 12 disciples at that time, or maybe just alone with God. We really don't know, but probably with his disciples. But it was very low key. He wasn't present. On Thursday, again, what we have is him entering into and having these discourses with people again. And then that night, there's the preparation for the Lord's Supper. And then there's this partaking of the Lord's Supper. As Penny said, Judas leaves and they partake of this Lord's Supper. She did a beautiful job last week. She basically did our communion part, and she talked about this empty seat, and that there's always this empty seat at the table of God for you. And the idea that all are invited, and even if it looks like every seat would be taken, there's always a seat for you. And that's what I think we love about God, and ultimately about Jesus' message. But today we're really focusing on Good Friday, which is today, as we're recording that today. And we all know Good Friday, by 9 o'clock in the morning after the Thursday. At Thursday night he was betrayed. By 9 o'clock in the morning they had crucified him, and it was about 6 hours until his death. And I could pick up on that being Good Friday, but this is really Easter, and so I want to talk about Easter, but I want to talk about Easter in a different sort of way, or the resurrection in a different kind of way of thinking about a couple of points. So I think that what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to just go to the text and read it, and I'll just kind of tell you kind of some, as I was reflecting on this spiritually and contemplating it, of just some things that came to mind for me during this Easter season. So we're going to pick up John. I mean, you can find the resurrection account in all of the Gospels. It's probably the least in detail in the Gospel of Mark, and probably, well, the other ones all speak for themselves. But I still want to pick up on. I want to pick up on after Jesus is dead on the cross, and he's still hanging on the cross. So we're going to start this resurrection story with Jesus now being on the cross and being dead, and what will happen in that Friday as we look towards the day of resurrection on Sunday. So in John 19, chapter 30, or not John 19, verse 38, it says this: After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate granted permission. So they came and took the body away. Nicodemus, who had first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds weight. So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden there was a new tomb, which no one had yet been laid. Therefore, because it was the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Verse 20, or chapter 20, verse 1. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb, and it was still dark, and she saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. So she ran and came to Simon, Peter, and said to the other disciples whom Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So Peter and the other disciple went forth, and as they were going to the tomb, the two were running together, and the other disciple ran ahead faster than Peter and came to the tomb first, which would have been John. And stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. And so Peter, Simon, also came following him, and he entered the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So the other disciple, who would have been John, who had first come to the tomb, then also entered, and he saw the linen wrapping, and he believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. So the disciples went away again to their homes. But Mary was standing outside the tomb, weeping, and so as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been laying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "Because they have taken my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Who do you seek?" Supposing him to be a gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you had carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned to him and said in Hebrew, "Rabbi," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend to my Father, and my God, and your God." Mary Magdalene came, announcing to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord, and that he had said these things to her." So the story is, there's a couple of things that I kind of want to bring forward out of this story that just kind of caught my eye when I was contemplating this story. There's so much emotion when we really stop and think about what this story represents. And for any of us that love God, that love Jesus Christ, love this teaching, and we have this relationship with him, but we never really met him in this physical sense. But I want to go back to when Christ was dead and he was hanging on a cross. Now, it says that after that time, Mary was there, John, the disciple, was there, the other disciples had scattered. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was there. Probably Joseph of Arimathea was there, and probably Nicodemus. At least that's what it looks like, or you could maybe make an argument for that. Although Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, they were both secret followers of Jesus, and so they weren't public followers of Jesus. And as far as we know through history, neither one of them ever became a public follower of Jesus. And I don't think that that's important. I think that there's something that happened in them where they recognized that Jesus was truly the Messiah. But we've got Jesus hanging on a cross. He's dead. They've stabbed him in the side and pierced his heart. And in piercing his heart, the Bible account says that out of his heart came blood and water, signifying that he was entirely dead. And Joseph goes to Pilate, knowing that it's time for the preparations for the Sabbath, and he knows that the sun will be setting soon. And he asks if he can have the body of Jesus. Pilate graciously gives them their body. At that time, maybe him and Nicodemus had already been talking about it during that day in the course of that event about what they would be doing at the end of Jesus' life. But they take Jesus' body and they take it to a tomb. And it's a tomb that had never been used before. And they take the body in there and they wrap it in the linen clothes. Jesus was at that time, had no garments. When he was crucified, he was completely naked. And so they wrapped him in this white, beautiful linen, and they put a face cloth on him, and they scattered the herbs the way that they would as their custom, and they sealed the tomb, knowing that Jesus was dead. But what I have to ask the question about is, what do you think was going through the mind at that time of both of those secret followers of Jesus Christ? It must have been the same way that it was for the women who had followed Jesus, the early disciples, the 12 that are 11 at this time that had followed Jesus. And there must have been in the midst of that, there must have been this sense of that that his ministry and his messianic mission was somewhat of a failure because Jesus was dead. But the interesting thing is that in contemplating the idea that Jesus is dead, there's a second movement to this story as it moves forward. And it moves forward that on Saturday, they argue there's a day of Sabbath rest. There's also this time where, according to the Nicene Creed, that Christ descended into Hades, or the place of the departed souls, and proclaimed liberty to them. But then comes this day with the sunrise on a Sunday. So what we have is we have a death on a Friday, and we have a sunrise on a Sunday. And Mary goes to the tomb, and when she gets to the tomb, she sees that Jesus isn't in there. But she's kind of confused about it because she doesn't know what's going on. The stone is rolled away. She notices, looks in there, and sees that Jesus is gone. But she, at this point, at least in the Johannine account, she didn't have any interaction with any angels yet or with Jesus yet. She just simply looked in the tomb, and this tomb is empty. And there's this idea of this emptiness and this idea that Jesus, and you think about it, it's like the idea is that Jesus died on Friday, and the tomb is empty on Sunday because someone has taken his body somewhere else. And there's got to be this sense for Mary of this entire and this complete loss. She runs back to the disciples, Peter and John, and she tells them what she's seen. And so the two of them take off running towards the tomb. And it says that John outran Peter. But when John gets there, he kind of looks in but doesn't go in. And Peter, of course, being Peter, as impetuous as he was, runs right into the tomb. And as he runs into the tomb, he sees these linen cloths that are lying there. And it doesn't say that he believed. It was unexplainable. And if you think about it right there, you could be saying this body got stolen. Somebody took this body. But John then looks in, and John peeks in, and when he peeks in, there's a couple things in this Johannine, or one thing in this Johannine text that's not in the other three synoptic gospels. And it says that, and he saw the face cloth rolled up and put in a separate place. It's interesting because when John walked in and all those things were there, it says, and John believed. In other words, John at that very instant, in seeing that empty tomb, already at that point had believed what it is that Jesus said, that he would resurrect from the dead. At that point, both of them not knowing what to do, they decide to leave. And so they leave and they go their way, go back to their homes, trying to ponder and think about all the things that had happened. And there's Mary left. She's left with an empty tomb, a dead Jesus 2 days before. Nothing to look forward to. She looks in the tomb and she sees these two angels. She's just, what must she be feeling at that point? And she looks in there, and these angels are in there, and they say, Mary, why is it, or woman, why is it that you're weeping? And at that time, she doesn't even answer, but she turns around after seeing these figures that weren't there before, and she turns around and she sees this gardener who she thinks is this gardener. And she looks and the gardener says, woman, why are you weeping? And a beautiful thing, whom do you seek? Who is it that you're looking for? Why are you here? Why are you crying? And who is it you're looking for? And she says, "Sir, if you can tell me where they're taking their body, I'll go to it. Somebody's taking the body. I don't know where it's been laid. Can you just tell me where the body is laying?" And he looks and he just simply says a very profound word. He says, "Mary." And at that point, she looks and she recognizes that it's her resurrected Lord. And at that time, it's funny because, it's funny, but she grabs a hold of him, holding on to him like, "Lord, Lord." And he's kind of going, "Look, you can't keep me to yourself. You're going to have to let me go here because I've got some other work I've got to do. But go and tell Peter and the other disciples that I've risen from the grave." So she goes back and she does exactly that. And it's the first encounter that somebody has with a resurrected Lord. In other words, Mary is the first one to see the risen Lord. Well, I think about those 2 days. I think about Friday with Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus ministering to the body of Jesus, a person they believed to be the Messiah and whom obviously they loved and cared for. And all of the despair that they must have felt, along with John, the rest of the disciples, through Friday and Saturday, and even Sunday morning, the brokenheartedness of Mary and all of them, that all was lost and all was a failure. And in the midst of it, she comes and finds this tomb empty. And through a series of events, she finds this resurrected Lord, that he has truly risen and risen indeed. He is alive. That Jesus has risen and he's alive. And so you see this beautiful movement from the idea of in the midst of death, there's already the beginning of life. And what we have to understand sometimes is that in the midst of this Easter season and the celebration, that God's not so much interested in death, but he's interested in life. He knows that death is imminent for all of us, but also he knows that he's the God of the living and not the dead, as Jesus had earlier proclaimed during this week when he says he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that I am. And then he looks at the Sadducees and says, I'm the God of the living, not the dead. And so in this resurrection, what he's saying is, even in the midst of my death, and even in the midst of everything that's happening, in my resurrection, understand that I am life, and I am the way, and I am the truth. And by me, I've granted you eternal life, or life forevermore. And so there's this beautiful movement from death to life. And that's the resurrection story. The resurrection story is because of what Jesus did on the cross. The heartbreak of the cross, that it cannot be understood without the glory of the resurrection. The cross by itself makes no sense. It's just simply an instrument of death. But on that cross, the thing that God showed us and Jesus showed us, that he is present in the midst of death, but in the midst of that death, he always has resurrection in mind. I don't know what you're going through today. I don't know what you're going to be facing this coming year. All I know is that God has a plan for you, and he has a plan for me and for all of us. And in the midst of our darkest moments, those dark things we go through, whether it be health issues, death of a loved one, financial issues, the loss of a job, struggling with mental illness, either within ourselves or with family members, whether it has to be with any of the other things and categories that we can suffer in. And I know that sometimes we feel like we're suffering death. And sometimes we will, and we know that eventually we will die. But the hope, as Penny said earlier about the little girl, the hope is the promise of God that our life will be extended into eternity. The only thing is that as Penny had said earlier about that seat at the table, that for us to be present in the Lord's Supper means that there's a seat at the table if we say yes, if we choose to sit down with Jesus on that mysterious day. And today also there's a seat or there's a place at the foot of the cross for you to understand this death and what it means that Jesus, redeeming us, reconciling us, healing us. And also understand this, that there's also a place for us at the tomb of Jesus where we gaze into the tomb, see the linen cloth rolled up, believe like John did, and simply say, Rabbi, you have risen, and you are risen indeed. And by doing that, we say yes. We say yes to death. We say yes to life. and we say yes to the future of our future with God. It begins with saying yes and wanting to have a seat at the table with God. So today, as we celebrate Easter, I guess the question is do you believe? John believed without any proof at all other than that linen cloth and a rolled up face garment. And with that, he knew for a fact that what Jesus said he had done and that which he had promised he will continue to do. God bless you. I hope you have a great Easter service or Easter day. And Sunday we'll have this great Easter service. If you can make it our way, we'd love to have you. We have some special plans for Easter. So if you can't be here present with us, you can pick us up on Facebook on live stream. God bless you and have a wonderful Easter season.